Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tomisin, and my disease is West Nile virus. Now, before I begin my presentation, I would like to tell you a bit about why I picked West Nile virus. When I was 11 years old, there was an outbreak of West Nile virus, and it swept panic through my hometown and my city. And this disease, unsurprisingly, was West Nile virus, and it was the largest outbreak ever of this disease. So what I'll be informing to you about this disease is the history, transmission, symptoms, mortality rate, treatment, prevention, and some social issues. Now, starting off, what is West Nile virus? West Nile virus is an RNA flavivirus from the Japanese encephalitis group. It's a lot less severe than many other mosquito-borne illnesses that are similar to West Nile virus, such as malaria, dengue fever, yellow fever, Japanese encephalitis virus, some tick-borne illnesses, etc. And with the history, in 1937 it was first found and isolated in Uganda, contracted by a Ugandan woman. And in the mid-1900s, it spread to Europe, causing some sporadic European outbreaks that resulted in some quarantines for the people who contracted the disease. But in 1996, there was the first real major European outbreak, in which 10% of the population with West Nile virus contracted severe West Nile virus, which is a lot more dangerous and deadly than West Nile virus. Now, continuing on with the history, in 1999, West Nile virus first came to the US, and it's really unknown how it came to the US because there are many mosquito-borne illnesses that stay in places like Africa, Europe, and the Middle East, such as malaria, dengue fever, and some of the illnesses that I listed earlier. And in 2012, as I stated in my introduction, there is the largest outbreak in the history of the disease, and this outbreak was here in the US. Most of it, 40% of it, was concentrated in Texas, where this meeting resides today. This outbreak resulted in 3,100 cases and, unfortunately, 131 deaths. Transmission. The most common form of transmission for West Nile virus is through mosquito bites, although it can also be transmitted horizontally from person to person through things like organ transplants and blood transfusions. They're basically putting a part of me inside of another person. So West Nile virus circulates between mosquitoes and birds. And the reason it does this is because birds have a high amount of a chemical called viremia in their blood. And the viremia in their blood causes the West Nile virus to stay in their blood. So when an infected mosquito bites a bird, then that bird contracts West Nile virus to get sick. And when an uninfected mosquito bites that same bird again, then it contracts West Nile virus, allowing for the disease to spread on. Now, there are two dead-end species in this cycle, and these two dead-end species are horses and humans. And the reason this is because horses and humans don't have that high level of viremia in their blood, so it doesn't circulate. So when an uninfected mosquito bites a human or horse with West Nile virus, it doesn't contract that disease. Symptoms. The symptoms of West Nile virus are very flu-like. They include symptoms of the common cold like fever, headache, sweats, chills, diarrhea, vomiting, nausea, etc. But severe West Nile virus is neuroinvasive, meaning it goes inside of the brain and affects it. And majority of the time, it's affected by brain inflammation. And this brain inflammation can lead to encephalitis, which is a disease on its own, a type of brain inflammation, which is even more severe. Mortality rate. The chance of you contracting the symptoms if you're bitten by a mosquito that has West Nile virus is much lower than it would be for other mosquito-borne illnesses. It's about 20%. So that means 80% of people bitten by mosquito with West Nile virus are asymptomatic, and they don't contract any symptoms, and they doesn't really bother them at all. The chances of getting severe West Nile virus is 1%, and this chance increases if you have other diseases such as cancer, diabetes, and immunocompromised system. The chance of dying of severe West Nile virus is about 10%, which is still very low compared to other diseases, which is why it's categorized as a less severe strand. And in the 1996 outbreak, 10% of everybody with West Nile virus got severe West Nile virus. So 10 times more people died, which is why it was such a epidemic at the time. Treatment/experiment. In the experiment that I studied, the objective was to create a vaccination or treatment for West Nile virus. And the way they wanted to do this was to use antibodies. So they would combine the antibodies with the West Nile virus strand and have the antibodies fight off that West Nile virus so that they would gain an immunity towards it. Then they would inject it into humans so that that immunity would be beneficial to us. Now, the hypothesis was that the results of the experiment would be positive and that the antibodies would resist West Nile virus. For the procedure, it was basically the antibodies being mixed with West Nile virus. And the two antibodies that they mainly used, as we learned in our wet bench lab research, are IgM and IgG. And the reason for this is because IgG is used in primary infections, and IgG passes that information on to IgM, which is used in secondary infections to gain that immunity. Now, the results of my experiment were positive, resulting in a more effective response to West Nile virus. Now, you may think, why isn't there a vaccination for West Nile virus today? And in the conclusion, the authors explained that further research was needed to get this disease FDA approved, government approved, and distributed out to the world. So for further application, they suggested that we use the same concept, but on other diseases. And this has been done, and we've been able to create vaccinations for other diseases such as mumps, chickenpox, smallpox, and more. Prevention. The most effective way to prevent West Nile virus is to simply stop mosquitoes from biting you. And this can be done by using long-lasting repellents. And chemicals that are in long-lasting repellents that work best include DEET and picaridin. Another way is to wear thick clothing, because mosquitoes can bite through thin clothing such as the shirt that I'm wearing. And that would get me infected with West Nile virus. You also want to keep mosquitoes out of your home. And ways you can do this is by keeping the AC on, because mosquitoes don't like that type of environment. And another way is to clear any empty standing water around your home. Because empty standing water, as you see in places like swamps, they attract multiple types of bugs, including mosquitoes. Social issues. In the European outbreak, much of the social issues basically had to do with quarantine. Anybody who got the disease was automatically quarantined, and panic was stricken through the city, but they basically put you in a box and hoped that you would live. And in the 2012 outbreak, it was similar. There wasn't very much preparation. So people weren't ready for this disease. It wasn't supposed to come to America, and we don't even know how it got here. The media unnecessarily scared people because we didn't understand this disease, and we heard that it was the largest outbreak of its kind. So they didn't hear that it was less severe than others and that the low chance of you actually contracting this disease. And a lot of people put blame onto the government for not having a well-structured disease response system. But Aristotle said, use assistance, not advice, in the time of a crisis. And instead of criticizing the government, people weren't actually trying to help and create a better infrastructure to respond to this type of disease. So in conclusion, I want to stress 4 points. And these 4 points include the historical outbreaks in 1996 and 2012, and that we should learn from this and how this happened, why this happened, and how we can prevent it next time. Second off, we should understand how to diagnose West Nile virus, and that flu-like symptoms don't mean that you have the flu. You could have something more severe. Also, you want to support funding and research for possible vaccinations for this disease to help the scientists that are trying to make our lives better and easier to do their job. And also, we want to know and use prevention in our daily lives to use mosquito repellent and thick clothing to prevent mosquitoes from biting us and us from getting infected. These are my references. Any questions?
Jasmine, questions?
Moses.
You said that West Nile virus can be contracted through like organ donations and blood transfusions. Will that occur 100% of the time, or?
No, it won't occur 100% of the time. Usually, it's about the same chance as getting bitten by a mosquito that they're symptomatic. So they'll get the disease, but it's still a low chance of the disease for being symptomatic.
I believe I have two questions actually. You said that humans and I think horses were like a dead end species. I think you said.
Yes.
What exactly does that mean?
A dead end species means that they can't really pass it back to mosquitoes and continue that cycle like mosquitoes and birds can.
Okay, and then also another one. You said empty standing water. Does that mean just like open bottles of water and things like that?
Like if I have a flower pot and I have like a water in it, it is just standing there, and that attracts insects, and that's bad.
Thank you.
Christopher.
Okay, so can you just like tell me how common the West Nile virus is again? Because just I wanted to know right now.
What do you mean by how common? Can you elaborate?
How common it is for you to contract it by how common it is for you to get bitten by one of the mosquito vectors that carry West Nile?
I don't have exact numbers on how common people get the disease, how many people get the disease if they're bitten. Well, like I have the mortality rates and things like that. So you have a 20% chance of contracting the symptoms, 1% chance of getting severe, 10% chance of dying from severe. But I don't have the exact numbers on how many people get it on average. So to look up that, I'll go to the CDC. It tracks West Nile virus and it has certain maps on it. So if you're really interested, you can look that up and see for yourself.
Okay, Jasmine.